Hi there, students. To come to grief, to be unsuccessful, to fail. Let's see, grief is talking about emotional pain, suffering, hardship. Yeah, grief, sadness. So if something comes to grief, it means you end up being sad, which means you fail. So all my plans came to grief, to have a setback. So I was cycling down this mountainside and I came to grief about halfway down when I fell off and broke my arm. The project came to grief when it ran out of money. Okay, so if something comes to grief, it doesn't work. I thought the negotiations were going really well, but then everything came to grief right at the end. So to come to grief, to experience something unpleasant, to be unsuccessful. He wouldn't have come to grief if he hadn't disobeyed the instructions, to suffer a disastrous outcome, to suddenly fail, often because you have an accident, but you don't have to have an accident. He was in the lead of the Grand Prix, the Formula One Grand Prix, but then he came to grief on the final corner. Okay, so to be unsuccessful, not to do well, to meet with disaster. So the Titanic came to grief with crashing against an iceberg. Yeah, it's when some things go awry, when things go wrong, when things don't work. That's when things come to grief. Yeah, you have an accident and things come to grief. Something can be harmed or destroyed. So I thought my studies were going really well, but unfortunately I came to grief in the exams and I failed the exam. It's to have a disappointing outcome, an unfortunate outcome, to be unsuccessful. Okay, so in the end everything came to grief. If he keeps driving quickly like this, one of these days he's going to come to grief. He's going to have an accident. He's going to suffer disaster. Things are just going to go wrong for him. Yeah, so things will come to grief. Will be tragedy. He attempted to create a business, but everything came to grief. The ship came to grief in a storm. Their marriage came to grief after about a year of being married. Okay, so yeah, grief is talking about sadness. So yeah, we're normally pretty sad when our plans fail, when things come to grief, when things don't work out in the way we wanted. He was driving too fast and almost came to grief. Yeah, he might be hurt. If someone comes to grief, they fail in what they're doing. They could be hurt. They're unsuccessful. His plans came to grief after a series of unforeseen setbacks. Yeah, things just went wrong. Yeah, to go wrong. The expedition came to grief in a huge tropical storm. Yeah, it failed. Yeah, if something comes to grief, it fails, and it may hurt you. Many marriages come to grief due to a lack of money. He was driving too fast and he came unstuck. He came to grief. Yeah, to come unstuck, to suffer disaster, disappointment, to fail, to be defeated when something falls flat. Several pedestrians came to grief on the icy pavement. If you try to fly too high, you may come to grief, like the story of Icarus and Daedalus. Icarus flew too close to the sun and came to grief. Um, okay, they will come to grief sooner or later because they are attempting too much. If you don't look out, you're going to come to grief. If you underestimate the intelligence of your rivals, you're going to come to grief. If you show such a lack of modesty, you're going to come to grief. So, come to grief, formality. I'd give this a 4 in formality. This is for an informal conversation, maybe even 3.5. Informal conversation, semi-formal conversation. For semi-formal writing, maybe just about, but it's a bit informal. So to come to grief, to have a disastrous outcome. Come to grief.